Who are the most underrated NFL teams going into the 2020 NFL season? In this video, I give you the 6 teams I believe are the most underrated by the media, by Vegas, and by NFL fans heading into the 2020 season. Before I give you the most underrated teams in the NFL, spike the like button, subscribe to The Bottom Line View for more NFL vids just like this, and comment below your opinion on the most underrated teams in football going into 2020. Which teams do you feel need more respect and more hype entering 2020? Kicking off the most underrated teams going into 2020 at number 6 is the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are a team that I don't think's going to the playoffs. I don't think they're a dark horse in the NFL, but I don't think enough people are talking about just how talented this team is on paper. And yes, they have a rookie quarterback. Yes, they have an unproven coach, but they actually had a really awesome offseason, and you could see it pay off day one in 2020. Just take a look at their defense and how they've built their secondary, adding players from the Vikings like Trey Waynes and Alexander. They added Von Bell from New Orleans. That secondary will be much better with William Jackson at cornerback number 1. The defensive line added arguably the best run defender in the NFL with DJ Reader. And the offense now has maybe the best young quarterback we've seen in the past 2 or 3 drafts. I mean, Joe Burrow could have an instant impact, and I do believe that him being a little bit more experienced, a little bit older, will actually help him transfer to the NFL and have immediate success. And what also helps him is having an amazing supporting cast at the skill positions with Tyler Boyd and potentially AJ Green. If he's really AJ Green, this offense, these receivers could be scary. John Ross is a speedy outside threat, and they drafted T. Higgins. Joe Mixon is one of the most dangerous running backs in the NFL, running the football and catching the football. If this offensive line can improve just a little bit, they are going to have a dangerous, electrifying offensive team, and their defense, I feel, could be improved. So when you look at it on paper, yes, the AFC North is very difficult, but the Bengals could win more games than people are expecting in 2020 simply because they're a lot more talented. At number 5, the 5th most underrated team heading into 2020 is the AFC South champions from a season ago. I feel like people actually forgot that the Houston Texans won the AFC South last year. But yeah, they did. And as far as I understand, they still have their coach. They still have their quarterback in Deshaun Watson, who's one of the 4 best in the game and one of the true quarterbacks that's capable of carrying a football team to double-digit victories. Deshaun Watson and the Texans actually took a step forward in 2019. They won a playoff game versus the Bills. And if you remember correctly, they were actually leading the Super Bowl champion Chiefs at one point during the divisional round. Yes, they coughed it up, they lost, but they still improved in 2019. What's to say that they cannot improve or at least get back to where they were a season ago? A team that has one of the 5 best quarterbacks is at the bottom of the list for their potential to win the Super Bowl. That to me just doesn't make a lot of sense. They really didn't lose as much as people think. They lost DeAndre Hopkins on offense. Yes, he's one of the 5 best receivers in the game. But you have to remember that they also added receivers. They added Brandon Cooks, one of the best downfield receivers with great speed. He's a great route runner and has familiarity within this type of offense, playing in New England before coming to Houston. And then you talk about adding Randall Cobb, who kind of had a resurgent season a season ago in Dallas as their slot receiver, will play a similar role in Houston, where he doesn't have to be the number 1, he doesn't have to be the number 2, he can fit in nicely as the number 3. They still have Kenny Stills and the big play monster Will Fuller, so their receiver position is still really good. I'd argue it might be deeper and actually better than with DeAndre Hopkins. This offensive line will be intact from training camp through the season. Last year, they actually threw together an offensive line kind of early in the season. They figured it out, and it improved with every single week. Tunsil will be starting week 1 at left tackle. That is huge for them. I really like Howard as a young right tackle. And then you add David Johnson at running back. He just adds an extra dimension from what you had in Carlos Hyde as a pass catcher. Defensively, I don't love their defense. I think it's not very good on paper, but if Garyon Connolly can come in at cornerback and play well, I already like Bradley Roby. This cornerback position might actually be better than it was a year ago. And JJ Watt is healthy, at least to start the season this year. Last year, he missed most of last season. Their number one player, their number one pass rusher. Yes, they did lose DJ Reader, but DJ Reader is more run stuffer than he ever was a pass rusher. They did draft Ross Blacklock in the second round to hopefully replace part of his production. They still have Justin Reed. They still have Whitney Merciless. They still have their awesome combo of inside linebackers. They had a terrible defense last year, and people really didn't talk about it, but could it be any worse than it was a year ago? I'm not exactly sure it can be. The fourth most underrated team going into 2020. It's funny because I feel like the Indianapolis Colts and the Texans are both underrated despite being within the same division. I feel the Colts are a team that mostly fans are sleeping on, while the media, parts of the media at least, are hyping the Colts up, and Vegas is starting to lean towards the Colts. The fans are kind of struggling behind, and they don't realize the potential that exists within this team. The Colts have an underrated defense, specifically within the front seven. When you add a DeForest Buckner to a Justin Houston, a Teray, I feel like this defensive line could be much better and actually one of the sneaky ones in the league. The linebacking position is arguably the best, led by Darius Leonard, my top linebacker in the NFL. And their secondary, people are saying that's their weakness. I don't think it's really terrible. I think it's kind of average. And if Xavier Rhodes can actually step up and be a number one corner, then maybe they're better than average. Offensively, they're going to be one of the best running football teams in the league. You have a quarterback and a coach combination that have worked together before. So it's not like you're having to catch a quarterback up with a new offense, a new scheme. Yes, he was many seasons with the Chargers, but Reich was with him for his best seasons with the Chargers. T.Y. Hilton is healthy entering the season. They added a number 2 in Michael Pittman Jr. I really think this receiving position could be better. The running back position got an upgrade in the draft with Taylor, who I think is one of the more explosive rookie running backs coming out of the draft. And again, this offensive line is just going to overwhelm people. So they can play a style of football that is made for a veteran quarterback on kind of his last run. You can run the football, you can play some good defense, strong defense with a strong pass rush, and a lot of fast playmakers at the second level. I feel like this Colts team, you need to stop sleeping on, because I do see them at least making the playoffs in 2020. The third most underrated team entering 2020 is the Las Vegas Raiders. Yes, the Las Vegas Raiders, I feel, are underrated, and it's mostly due to the fact that the Broncos are getting most of the hype in the AFC West, but I kind of think it's even between the Broncos and the Raiders are actually dead last in terms of Vegas odds to win the Super Bowl in the AFC West. I think that is wrong. I think that is dead wrong. I look at this coaching staff and I see improvement. I think John Gruden had a fantastic season that not enough people are talking about in 2019. I think Derek Carr gets a little bit too much hate. He is talented, and he hasn't had a lot surrounding him in recent seasons at the receiver position. And now they had a first rounder, one of the more explosive, fast receivers in the sport already. He hasn't even taken a snap. But Henry Ruggs is just that. He can make a play with the ball in his hands. He's excellent in that area. And you have other playmakers that do the same thing, like Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs, two studs at running back and tight end. You can work your offense through these three playmakers and this offensive line that's powerful, protects Carr, and really can just run people over running the football. Defensively, it's young, a lot of youth here, but also with youth leads to potential, right? You add Corey Littleton at middle linebacker to put the pieces together. I like the safety position. It's very deep. You added Demarius Randall. You have Heath coming in from Dallas, a leader there, and LaMarcus Joyner. Abram is back and healthy. There is a really promising secondary with 2 first-round picks at cornerback. You add a Mukamara into the mix as a veteran. And this defensive line has like a lot of players under 3 years of experience that could just explode in their second or third season, led by Crosby, who could get better in his second year. I think this defense, if it actually surprises and enters the top half, the top 15, then we're talking, because we know Gruden can manufacture offense and score points, and Carr can be efficient with the football, and they can run the ball, as we saw last year. But if this defense can take the next step, then the Raiders are going to be underrated and maybe even make the playoffs. The number 2 most underrated team in the NFL entering 2020 is the Cleveland Browns. Yes, the Cleveland Browns, and underrated recently doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense, but this is the classic case of post-hype sleeper. So everyone was hyping them up in 2019. They disappointed, so everybody's off the bandwagon. But then you realize that, hey, this team actually put together another awesome offseason, and they still have one of the more talented rosters in the league, and they fixed a lot of their deficiencies. They fixed their offensive line. They added 2 tackles, high priority, right tackle in free agency with Conklin, left tackle in the draft with a top pick. So this offensive line will now be one of the best in the game from tackle to tackle. The tight end position has a dynamic duo in Njoku and Hooper, who they also signed. Odell and Landry are a perfect complement at receiver. Baker Mayfield can take that huge step forward, but he won't really need to when you can just hand it off to Chubb and Hunt in the backfield. Defensively, they fixed their depth up front. Adding an Adrian Claiborne was huge for them. And then in the secondary, they have so much potential with cornerbacks Ward and Greedy Williams. I really feel like the Browns are a team that, yes, everyone hyped them a year ago, and maybe those people, like myself, were wrong. But in 2020, I think this is the year that you jump back on board of the bandwagon, because I actually think that the positions that derailed them, coach, offensive line, are much better in 2020, and that will allow them to make a run to the playoffs. And the number 1 most underrated NFL team entering 2020 is the Detroit Lions. I feel like I led the charge with the Lions this offseason. People are starting to get the whispers of the Lions. They're starting to actually figure out these Lions might be underrated. Not enough people are talking about them. You could credit me for starting that trend. Regardless, though, I feel like the Lions are actually very underrated and the most underrated team entering 2020, the most underrated NFC team for sure. As you can see, there's only one NFC team on this underrated list, and that's because I feel like the NFC is rather overrated or fairly rated. And the Lions have a chance to exceed expectations in 2020, their 3rd year with Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia now has his pieces in place in the secondary on defense and has added some key veterans, Patriot-like players, Danny Shelton up front, Jamie Collins at the second level, Daron Harmon at safety. You have Jeff Okudah now as your number 1 corner, Justin Coleman at nickel, and Desmond Trufant, who is one of the more underrated signings of this offseason. That's a new trio at corner who could be quietly one of the better ones in the league. Offensively is where the Lions could really be special and surprise a lot of people. I think the Lions will for sure be a top 10 offense in 2020, and the reason being is that they're so balanced with the ways that they can attack you. They can go 3 receivers, they can go 2 tight ends, they can go 2 backs if they like, they can run, they can pass. DeAndre Swift, Kerryon Johnson, a dynamic duo in the backfield. Swift being, for some people, the most talented running back in the draft. The offensive line is solid. It did get an upgrade on the right side at right tackle. TJ Hawkinson could be the piece that unlocks this passing game, and Matt Stafford is one of the most talented passers in the NFL. 2019 might have been Stafford's best season if he stayed healthy. At receiver, Marvin Jones, Kenny Golladay is one of the best duos in the league, and you still got the vet Danny Amendola who comes in clutch. This team has much more talent than people realize. I think this could be the season on the hot seat for Patricia and Bob Quinn, where they make things happen. And with the NFC North being so wide open, they could be the team to go from worst to first in 2020. Those are the 6 most underrated teams in the NFL entering 2020. If you enjoyed, spike the like button and subscribe for more NFL vids just like this. It's Mitch. Peace.